Hello, faithful listeners. My name is Clay Thompson, and I'll be your guide and narrator in the Fiction Room, where stories and sagas from the minds of r/WritingPrompts come alive. Today's prompt is brought to us from username Nuggles. They say you die twice. One time when you stop breathing, and a second time a bit later on when somebody says your name for the last time. What they don't say is that in between those deaths, you get stuck in purgatory with all the great philosophers and authors, all just waiting to die. As always, I hope you'll enjoy listening to these stories as much as I will enjoy reading them. But without further ado, let us begin with our first story, written by Apathetic Revolution. But seriously, I went on, why is there a naked man sitting in the corner? Socrates scratched his chin and studied the man for an uncomfortably long time before replying, "Wonder is the beginning of wisdom." It was the closest thing he'd gotten to a reasonable answer. At least it wasn't another question. Plato, who seemed to always be by his side, defended him. "It's kind of his thing. He doesn't do straight answers. He wants to sound deep, but I can already tell you he hasn't got a clue." Socrates snorted at Plato. "Don't you think, as my protege, you should maybe show me a bit more respect?" Plato, clearly sick of hearing this, shot back as if on script. "We both know I wouldn't still be here if it weren't for you." I mean, you've both been here thousands of years. So neither of you have even tried to figure out why the dude in the corner isn't wearing any clothes? They both shrugged. "I think everyone who gets here asks the same question," Burt Reynolds interrupted. "But nobody I asked even knows what language he speaks." Hammurabi joined the group and nodded at me and Burt. "New blood, eh? Let me guess, you're wondering about the naked guy." We all waited to see if he was going to be the one who could add any insight. "He's one of very few people who has remained here longer than I have, and even I do not know who he is." I grunted in frustration. "Ugh!" Ugh, the man sitting in the corner, turned his head to look at us. I greatly enjoyed this story, because it's a more comedic take on a prompt that could easily be profound with some hidden message. But instead it reads more like a sitcom, where Socrates and Plato are the two friends that constantly bicker like an old married couple, while everyone else is along for the ride and getting into all kinds of shenanigans. But for now, let us move on to our second story, written by Ledge and Dairy. Fred admired how, even in purgatory, human beings had found a way to emulate the high school cafeteria stereotype. Racial discrimination didn't exist here. Title was everything. Were you a musician? You eat, drink, converse, sleep near, and otherwise live with the other musicians. Philosopher or scientist? Enjoy a daily lecture from Socrates or Newton, followed by a rebuttal from Plato. Hawking was a new addition. Fred admitted it was strange seeing him outside of his wheelchair and actually communicating. Author? Well, Jane Austen has a seat for you. Unless you wish to sit with the more edgy authors, in which Poe and his contemporaries talked about their area of purgatory. Everyone had a title. How odd that in purgatory your stereotypes are what truly and actually define you. There was likely some lesson to be learned in that, but Fred didn't wish to think about it. He had a mission. He made his way over to the great scientists and sat plumb in the middle of them. Newton was theorizing the matter around them and tying it to some form of thermodynamic supercharged particle that kept them locked in purgatory. Or something. Fred was educated, but a large portion of his experience on Earth had been in Presbyterian schools. He had long ago left behind his initial thoughts of purgatory because, well, he was here. and he still was not forgotten. He didn't mind it, though. Being here wasn't all bad. Sure, it was a little uncomfortable, but that's life. Why wouldn't Second Life be a bit uncomfortable? Newton stopped mid-sentence and stared in horror. Fred? Somehow everyone knew everyone's names here. Another mystery both the philosophers and scientists attempted to answer. Didn't matter to Fred. All that mattered was that he was here. Hey, neighbor. The other scientists turned in confusion, likewise locking their gaze on Fred. Well, as I was saying, Newton continued his lecture, acutely aware of Fred's awkward presence. Fred pretended not to notice, nodding appropriately at what Newton was proposing. Others piped in and offered their theories and expounded on each other. Fred simply listened. It had all started a few, years isn't the appropriate term, as time had no real meaning here. Suffice to say, back some time ago, Fred had overheard the philosophers discussing second death and what it meant to die a second time. Nobodies, as they came to be known, arrived and departed in purgatory almost by whim, leaving almost as suddenly as they arrived, whereas the more well-known among them lingered, some for centuries and even millennia. They had proposed that second death was tied to remembrance on earth. Plato had rebutted that a third death was possible, that wherever you went from here, you once again remained until forgotten. That got Fred thinking. Maybe it was a bit selfish on his part, but his Presbyterian upbringing had brought him to a final conclusion. After purgatory was heaven or hell. Now, he was pretty sure he was going to heaven. Therefore, if third death really did exist, well, he didn't want to be forgotten anywhere. He figured that by tying the whole community together, though, it would offset his selfishness. Hopefully. He faintly recognized further selfishness in that act, trying to cheat the system. But, it was all he could do. Once Newton had finished, he rose from his seat and gave a polite nod to everyone. Well, thank you, Sir Isaac. That was certainly enlightening and has given me some things to think on. Now, if you don't mind, gentlemen, I have a few others to visit. The great scientists nodded in agreement, less ruffled than before, or so Fred had hoped. Over the weeks, he would visit as many groups as he could before his energy ran out, and he had to retire. Hey, Fred, how is your little project going? Gandhi had asked after one such journey. He had expressed great interest in his little project, but as of yet, had not mustered the courage to mirror his actions. What did you learn? Fred greeted his friend with a soft grin. Gandhi had been the first to introduce himself when Fred had experienced first death, truly as honorable as the history books made him out to be. Oh, I met all sorts of people with interesting ideas and even cultures. Isn't it odd how humans develop cultures even in purgatory? He sat on a bench and slowly removed his dress shoes, humming a bit to himself. Old habits die hard. No pun intended, he thought, chuckling to himself. I imagine I won't be here as long as most of you, but here's what I make of it. He paused, a bit for dramatic effect, and a bit to collect his thoughts. I believe that the more we are remembered on earth, the longer we are given to make an impact here in purgatory. It's a reward for our deeds on earth, to give us time to continue them here. With no clear direction, it's easy to fall into lazy patterns of behavior, falling back on what you know best with others who know it as well. I think the key to heaven is our impact in purgatory, not earth. Earth simply gives us a head start, so to speak, here. Gandhi pondered a moment. Huh. You know? I think you are correct. When his time finally came, Fred Rogers was met with a chorus of, "Goodbye, neighbor! Goodbye, neighbor! Goodbye, neighbor!" as he casually slipped off his dress shoes and jacket, put on his sneakers and cardigan, and stepped through the door of light with his name over it. He hoped it had been enough. With how wrong he had been about purgatory, he had no idea what this second death would be like, or what was waiting for him on the other side of this door. But as he had told countless children during his time on Earth, he decided to be brave and see what this next adventure had in store for him. I seriously think that even after he's been gone, long after he's passed away, I should say, Fred Rogers has continued to have a profound impact on the world around us. I know he has for me. I grew up watching Mr. Rogers like many other children in America and probably around the world. And I cannot find a better person to think of as an ideal human being than Mr. Rogers. The only other ones that come to mind are Steve Irwin and Bob Ross. And this just hits it on the nail head that Fred Rogers would have a profound impact on everyone, even when he goes to the afterlife, if there is one waiting. Fred Rogers is and always will be, just like the writer of this story, legendary. And now, dear listeners, we must unfortunately bid you farewell once again. Thank you all for tuning into the Fiction Room. As always, I hope you enjoyed listening to these stories as much as I enjoyed reading them. If you could please leave a like and a comment and subscribe to the channel, it would very much help. But for now, wherever you are in the world, be safe, be well, and we'll see you all next time.